So welcome back, everyone. We are finishing up our lecture on Chapter 10, Organization Change and Innovation. So in the first part of the lecture, we covered creativity and innovation. I introduced the concept of bricolage, which is, I would describe as a rational approach to the process of creativity. And then we talked about change. Organizations exist in a changing environment, and in response, they have to go through constant change themselves in order to not only adapt to the changing environment, but to effectively compete within that environment. So on the agenda for today, we are going to talk about organizational development, which is the process of changing an organization. We'll continue the discussion about innovation and also areas where the change of an organization might be resisted. So, organizational development. And this is really the process of changing an organization. And it's defined here as the set of techniques for a planned change within an organization. And the goal of that change is to make people and organizations more effective. And what I would highlight in this definition is that organizational development is about targeting both people and the organization itself. And the idea is, or the goal is to make both more effective. And then typically this change is carried out by a so-called change expert, a change agent rather, and these change agents often are consultants that are expert in human behavior, right? And so they're able to more effectively get workers to embrace the changes that an organization wants to engage in. So they act as a catalyst in helping the organizations embrace change so that they can deal with the problems that they are facing. So, organizational development, the idea of changing an organization so that the people and organization can be more effective. What can this idea be used for? And so here are ways in which organizational development is used. It could be used to manage conflict. And this is really just about improving relationships within the organization. If an organization has, a toxic environment because people are not getting along, or people have very different ideas about what direction the organization should head in, this can be the source of conflict. And so organizational development can be one approach to trying to resolve that conflict. Another way is just revitalizing an organization. This is typically the way in which an organization will develop. And this is about fostering innovation, improving communication within the organization to improve its effectiveness. But innovation, this is something that we talked about in the first part of the lecture. This is really a central focus of high-performing organizations. And then another way that organizational development can be used is in adapting to mergers. And so if a company is merged with a new company, it can often be a challenge to integrate the two firms. And the reason why is because they may have, for example, very different cultures. And so, one culture may dominate the other, and, be the source of change within that organization's culture, which can be resisted by some members of that organization. But also, there may be a loss of identity within the new company. And that could be a struggle for the employees within that company. So mergers are never an easy sort of activity to make work. There are lots of challenges to making organizations work. And, before even companies agree to merge, they look at and do a very extensive analysis on their ability to integrate, so that they can see whether there'll be lots of future problems with that merger. But even in well thought out, well planned mergers, where you think it might go well, there still can be lots of challenges for making it work. And so organizational development is a way to sort of improve that process. So how does organizational development work? Well, like everything you do within management, you want to adopt an evidence-based approach, right, which is a rational approach. And so that's illustrated here in this diagram. And so the first step, you want to diagnose the problem. And part of diagnosing the problem using an evidence-based approach would be about gathering evidence to see what the problem is, right? So you'll use tools such as surveys or questionnaires or interview people. You'll actually gather data to get a sense of what the problem is or what the issue is or how extensive an issue is. And then you'll actually adopt an intervention based on the evidence that you gathered. The intervention that you adopt also you want it to be evidence-based, right? So you want to adopt interventions that have been proven to be effective against whatever problem or issue the organization is confronting. And this is really just about, right? And so if there's relationship issues, for example, you would use an evidence-based practice to, deal with whatever relationship issues the organization has. You want to, I think the key here is that you want to make sure that you are using evidence-based practices. And then you want to evaluate how well that intervention is working. And again, you want to make use of evidence. And so if there was an issue of, let's say there was a relationship issue within the organization, it was creating a toxic environment, and as a result, let's say worker satisfaction was plummeting, right? Then what you might see in response to that is a high turnover and increase in absenteeism, right? People are just calling in sick constantly, people are quitting. So whatever intervention that you adopt, in order to evaluate the effectiveness of that intervention, you want to look at changes to see if there's any changes in absenteeism. You want to see if there's any changes in worker turnover. And then based on those results, you'll see whether the intervention is effective or not. And that will inform whatever it is that you need to do moving forward, whether you continue making use of it or you may have to try something new. And so that's basically like an overview of the organizational development process, the process of planning for changes within an organization. So those are changes. This slide is about innovation. And again, we defined innovation as making use of creative ideas within an organization, right? And so we defined creativity as an idea that has two features. It's an idea that is both novel on the one hand, right? So it has to be unique, and is useful on the other. And if that idea that meets the criteria of creativity, if that idea can actually be successfully implemented within the organization, then that's actually a form of innovation, right? So innovation is just an organization successfully adopting creative ideas. And there's two dimensions along which you can look at innovation. Along one dimension is how innovative that idea is. Is it an incremental improvement, or is it a brand new direction, right? And so one's more radically innovative than the others. And the other dimension is the type of innovation adopted. And it could be either a product-related innovation or a process-related innovation. And so in this chart, in this graph, in this matrix, there are examples of each of this. So, for example, in the product category, right? And so innovations in the actual products, you can have an incremental improvement as a form of innovation for a product. And an example of that would just be the newest generation, let's say, of a smartphone, so like the iPhone. I have the Samsung Note 10 Plus, right? They just came out with, and so the Note 10, as compared to the Note 9, would be just an incremental improvement. There's nothing radically different about my phone compared to the generation of phone that came before it. So that's an example of just an incremental improvement in products as an example of a form of innovation. But something that takes on a radically new direction would be something like driverless cars, right? This is when you introduce something new to the marketplace, something that hasn't been developed before, that would qualify as a radical form of innovation. It would qualify as a new direction. Driverless cars are one example of that. I think we talked a little bit about, well, we talked in one of my classes, I think my Friday class, we talked about driverless cars. Driverless cars are, you know, they are on the horizon. These are things that every car manufacturer is working on. And that is likely the future of driving. Driving is almost certainly in the near future going to be done entirely by computers. And so this would be an example of a radically new type of product, and so it qualifies as a new direction in product innovation. The other kind of innovation is a process innovation. And this is the process that goes into delivering and producing products and services. And so the examples that they have here are, and you can categorize each of these process innovations as either, you know, incremental improvements in a process or new directions as well. And so an example of an incremental improvement would be 3D printing. You know, so this is just sort of an improvement on the manufacturing process. Yeah, so I don't know how much you are familiar with 3D printing, but this is yet a new technology that is expected to have a massive impact on manufacturing. It gives manufacturers the ability to produce things in a way that they haven't been able to in the past, because you can just take a CAD sort of drawing of whatever it is that you want to produce, and sort of just print that thing out, whatever it is. And so it enables you to sort of customize the manufacture of almost anything in a way that's never been possible before. And so people have very high expectations for this, and it's expected. It constantly improves, and businesses expect, business leaders, especially within manufacturing, believe that this is sort of the future, and it's really going to sort of change the way manufacturing gets done. An example of a process that is a new direction is here they have panelized homes. So typically the way homes are manufactured is everything's done on site, right? So all the materials, all the lumber is brought to a job site, and everything is sort of built from scratch on the job site. It's a very inefficient process. And so there's a new way of building homes by using prefabricated parts that are built in a factory, right? And so you get the efficiency and accuracy that you get by assembling and building parts within a factory using machinery. And then you can, and so in this case, the home, the parts that make up the home are actually built within a factory, and then they're shipped to the job site, and then they're put together sort of like Legos. So it reduces sort of waste, and it makes the process go a lot quicker. That's sort of an example of a new, that's houses aren't built that way. And so this is a new approach to building homes. The same is being done with commercial buildings. So there's a modular approach where these modules will be built in a factory and then shipped to the site, and then sort of put together at the site. And it's sort of like this Lego process where they're just bolting in these different components. I remember watching a video. It was sort of like a sped up video of a building. I think it was like a 50-story building that was built in China, and it used these modular components that were manufactured in a factory, and then they were shipped to the site, and they were just put together very quickly. And so in like a couple of months, they built an entire 50-story building, which otherwise would have taken years to produce. So lots of innovation there. I talked about in, I think it was like week 2, I talked about Elon Musk. He believes that the most important innovation within his company is innovating by innovating on the machine that builds the machine. And so the machine that builds the machine, he's referring to his factory. And so the factory that he uses to churn out his cars, he thinks is a place where a lot of innovation can happen, and that this is where he can develop his strategic advantage, or one of his strategic advantages. And he, in his view, not a lot of innovation has gone into building the actual factory. And so this is a place that he focuses a lot of his effort and energy in innovating on his actual factory. And so that would be an example of a process innovation. Another example of a process innovation was an example that I gave in, I think, the Friday class, but I didn't talk about it in my Monday class. So I'll just mention it here. You never know when a fact like this might be useful. But as I mentioned, I owned a concert promotion company. And so basically what my company did was they would produce concerts, and concerts are usually categorized dependent on the amount of people that an artist can attract to any one of their shows. And so you group them as either club acts or theater acts or arena acts or stadium acts. And so depending on the size of the crowd that they're able to attract. And at the club level, that's typically less than 1,500 people. What I began doing was, instead of producing the show within an actual club that was designed, that was built specifically for live concerts, I would actually have the show done at a high school venue. And the reason why was because it was the source of a lot of potential fans that wouldn't ordinarily attend that show, right? And so when you have a nationally touring act play at, let's say, like a local high school venue, that's sort of a big deal for the high school, right? And it becomes like a major event for that community. So it's something that everyone wants to attend, not because necessarily the band that's going to be playing at their school, but because it is a famous band that's playing at their school, and they don't want to miss, that event when they had that nationally touring act play at their school. So it will draw a much larger crowd than ordinarily would have. And so this was a process innovation that I introduced within the concert promotion process. And you'd be surprised. I mean, these high schools, have these facilities that mostly go unused, and some of them are pretty large. They can hold 1,000 people or more. So that's what I used to do. They would have auditoriums or even gymnasiums, and we can convert a gymnasium into a whole concert venue. Anyway, so that's an example of a process innovation. And these next couple of slides sort of go into detail on what I just went over, so you can look at that. And then here in this slide, this talks about the components of an innovation system. So if you want your organization to be innovative, it really requires a whole system of elements that work together in order to create the innovation that companies are able to sort of generate and develop, which give them a strategic advantage. And so they're listed here. And as you recall, so a system is a bunch of interrelated parts that work together to achieve a common purpose. Right, so the common purpose here is to produce innovation, and a systems approach to understanding that process will look at all of the different elements that may be combined and that are interrelated that will produce that innovative outcome. And so I'll just mention a couple here. You need an innovation strategy, right? So you need, this has the idea of trying to achieve innovation needs to be built into the actual strategies that the organization adopts, right? Innovation doesn't come about by accident, or it's rare that it does, right? So, a modern competitive marketplace demands that companies be innovative. And so if you're going to effectively compete, you need to be an innovative organization. And in order to attain that, you need strategies specifically designed to push the organization in that direction so that they are innovative. I just read an article in the Wall Street Journal with the CEO of Fitbit. So Fitbit makes, they make electronic devices that track your like health data and track your workouts, right? So they'll have like a watch. I don't know, maybe some of you use this. I don't have a Fitbit watch, but I do have a health tracker and a watch that I have. So I use it to sort of track my workouts. And so Fitbit is one of like the big companies in this space, but they are now up again, and they're one of the early sort of leaders in this space. And they were one of the original companies that developed these kinds of products. But now everyone's in on this, all of the tech companies, right? So Apple, if you get an Apple Watch, it has all of the features that you would find in a Fitbit within the Apple Watch. Same thing with if you're in the Android ecosystem, right? I mean, Samsung and a lot of other companies make Android-based watches that have all of these sort of health trackers and these trackers that track your workouts. So now Fitbit is up against these huge, massive companies. And how are they able to compete against these enormous players? Well, as the CEO describes, it's really their focus on innovation. And so their strategy has innovation built into it. And part of that will be just allocating the resources necessary. So, they dedicate a very large percentage of their revenues to developing new ways in which they can put, health tracking within their devices. And so one of the things that they talked about is they feel like they're able to have their Fitbit watches detect whether someone has the COVID or not. And so they're currently working on trials to see if this is actually accurate or not, if it does have the ability to detect it. So, this is only because this company is actively searching for ways to improve on their products. And they have to, given the space that they're trying to compete in. Another thing is committed leadership. So this is the CEO talking about this, where the focus of the company is on innovation. You need that commitment from leadership in order to generate an innovative system within your organization to produce the innovation necessary to effectively compete. But there's other elements of here within this system that are important as well. I just highlighted a couple. So now, even though your company may be committed to innovation, innovation requires constant change, and there are going to be people within the organization that resist that change. And so that's going to be one of the challenges you need to confront as an organization in order to adopt a sort of an innovation strategy. In order and to adopt the changes necessary to be innovative. And so this diagram gets at the areas where the resistance occurs, or some of the causes of that resistance. And so here, employee fear will be a source of resistance. So employee characteristics, and also the characteristics found in the change agent. So whoever it is that's operating as sort of the catalyst for a particular change, some of the characteristics of that change agent will impact the degree to which employees will resist the change. And so an example of this would be, let's say an employee is concerned about the future of, let's say, their position. Right? Is this change going to push me out of a job? right? Or push me out of the current position that I hold, right? That will prompt resistance, obviously. Will it push out people that I am allied with within the organization or that I care about? Will it have a negative effect on them? These are some of the sources of resistance that you would find among employees. Now, characteristics that have to do with the change agent would be characteristics that might sort of foster distrust among the employees, right? So depending on how tactful the change agent is, their employees may be suspicious about, whether their motives are true or not. And so this last element, the change agent employee relationship, is really sort of a combination of these two characteristics. And the idea here is that in order to get over that resistance to change, you need to establish a trusting relationship between the change agents and the employees that have to go through the change. And that's sort of the key. That's, I think, the main sort of takeaway of this diagram. That in order to get employees to, in order to reduce the resistance that they experience, the key to that is establishing a trusting relationship so that their best interests are being served, and so that they believe that their best interests are being served. And that's sort of the key to that. In this last slide, and we will end it here, there's just a list of reasons that employees might resist change. And so I mentioned a couple, but you can sort of go through this entire list. I'll highlight a couple here. One of the ones that I mentioned, loss of status or job security, that's going to be a significant one, right? Whenever there's change within an organization, people are going to begin to question whether that change is going to have a negative impact on the position that they hold. And especially when these change agents are consultants, right? So companies, particularly large companies, often will employ the services of consultants who are just outside people, right? They don't have the established relationships or the emotional connections to the people within the organization. So there's going to be a lack of trust initially. And so employees are going to be very suspicious of their motives. And that's going to be a source of a lot of resistance among employees. Personality conflicts. So we're going to talk about personalities next week. But again, this is part of the characteristics of the employee versus the characteristics of the change agent. If people just don't get along, they're going to be less receptive to the ideas that these change agents present. So there's a list of here that you can go through. I won't go through all of them. I'll end it here. Yeah, I think that is it. So I will see everyone next week.